Good afternoon, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the pre-solicitation conference for the Texas Open Data Portal and Private Data Sharing Portal solution. This is request for offer number DIR, CPO, TMP 562, held this Wednesday, February 23rd at 2 p.m. Let's go ahead and cover a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. So we want to remind you that you can change your audio by switching between the computer audio and the phone call. All attendees are muted, but if you do have questions, go ahead and open your Q&A panel in your control panel, and you can enter questions in there, and we will take time to address those at the end of our presentation today. And before we get started, if you would, please raise your hand if you can hear us pretty clearly today so we can do a quick sound check. Just make sure that we have good quality sound. Excellent, thank you. See a lot of hands going up, so thank you very much for that. So let's go ahead and get started, and I will turn it over to your presenter and host today, Jennifer Tram.
Thank you, Tom. Let me begin by introducing myself and the other speakers for today. I'm Jennifer Tram, the procurement lead for this solicitation from Procurement Services with the Chief Procurement Office at DIR. Joining me today is Ed Kelly, the Chief Data Officer, with Stacy Lewis, the Open Data Portal Administrator, who are both from DIR's Chief Data Office. We will also be joined by Teresa Williamson, the Hub Program Manager, Janie Weber, the Assistant General Counsel, and Elizabeth Cooper, the Director of Technology, Planning, Policy, and Governance from DIR's Chief Technology Office. Next slide, please. Today, we will start with an overview of the current Texas Open Data Portal, followed by a high-level review of the Request for Offer, or RFO, the Hub Subcontracting Plan, Electronic and Information Resources Accessibility Forms, and then Matters of Law and Exceptions. Next slide, please. But first, please be aware that DIR is recording this conference and will be distributing it as an addendum on the Electronic State Business Daily, or ESBD. With this addendum, DIR will also include these presentation slides and the list of attendees. It is your responsibility to check the ESBD frequently, as all updates and/or changes to the solicitation will be posted there. The ESBD link for this solicitation is shown on the slide. Alternatively, you can Google ESBD, and in the main page, you will select the solicitation ID field and type DIR-CPO-TMP-562. Participants may submit questions electronically at any time during the conference using the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. The deadline for submitting questions by email is February 24th, tomorrow at 5 p.m. Questions must be submitted to my email address, jennifer.tram@dir.texas.gov. Official answers will be distributed as an addendum. Next slide, please. I will now turn the time over to Ed Kelly and Stacy Lewis.
Thank you, Jennifer. This is Ed Kelly. I'm the Chief Data Officer for the state of Texas. I really want to just try to give a quick vision of what our Open Data Portal and our Private Data Sharing Portal is for our program. The Open Data Portal and the Private Data Sharing Portal provide a centralized, secure, scalable repository for all Texas open data. It is a rich portal format that provides easy to understand visualizations and analytical capabilities for all Texans. Our customers or consumers of the product include research companies, includes our vendor population, it includes other state agency representatives, and also institutions of higher education. Our desire is to drive public engagement and to use more data to be able to be more innovative and accessible and transparent for government operations. It's also to provide an easy access platform for our data consumers to acquire the data that they need in the time that they are interested in getting it. The Open Data Portal and the Private Data Sharing Portal instances offer the ability to share regulated, personable, identifiable information, PII, and protected health information, PHI, data among Texas state agencies in a private and secure environment. That pretty much covers the vision for the program, and now I'd like to turn it over to Stacy Lewis.
Thank you, Ed. So my name is Stacy Lewis, and again, I'm the Open Data Portal Administrator. And to start, I'd like to talk about the growth of the Open Data Portal that we've experienced. The Texas Open Data Portal was initiated in 2014, and it came under the direction of our division in 2015. The solid line that you see here represents the number of publicly published assets on the Texas Open Data Portal, currently at 579. This data is from the end of 2021, and asset publication has continued to grow, and it actually currently stands at 586 data assets available to the public. The darker blue columns indicate cumulative visits, and the lighter blue represents cumulative downloads, and that is for the life of a publicly published asset. You can see the steady increase of usage of the Open Data Portal, both in publishing new assets and in the access and use by data consumers. Of note, we've recently reached a milestone of over 1 million cumulative visits. I did want to briefly address the decrease of assets in 2020. We recommend to our customers, our agencies and institutions of higher education, to implement open data governance policies and procedures. So looking at access, currency, relevancy of their assets, and perhaps updating, removing, or combining assets, as was the case here in 2020, to reduce any duplication and ensure that they're to the benefit of the data consumer. And if we could go to the next slide, please. This slide shows the representation of our customers, and those are the agencies and the institutions of higher education. We currently have 20 agencies publishing open data. The number of assets owned by a particular agency is in the parentheses after the agency name. Visits are represented in the darker blue and downloads in the lighter blue. The top 10 agencies by visits and downloads are listed here, with 10 agencies represented in the other category. We do anticipate expanded growth and participation due to legislation passed last year. With the passing of Senate Bill 475, agencies that are over 150 FTE or full-time employees are directed to post a minimum of 3 high-value data sets on the Texas Open Data Portal. This could possibly double our current participation of 20 publishing agencies. And that will wrap up my overview of the Open Data Portal.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Ed. I will now provide a high-level review of the RFO solicitation documents. Next slide, please. The purpose of this request for offer, or RFO, is to solicit responses from potential respondents to provide the Texas Open Data Portal and private data sharing portal solution to the state of Texas. With the issuance of this RFO, DIR is seeking to find an open data portal and private data sharing portal solution that is highly scalable, reliable, flexible, and feature-rich. Other desired outcomes include increased data sharing and transparency, while protecting sensitive, personally identifiable information and other data subject to access control restrictions, enhance indexing, retrieval, and data management, presentation features, friendly user interface and experience, and as a complement to Texas.gov services. Next slide, please. The RFO consists of 17 documents. Documents 1 through 8 represent the RFO and the RFO attachments, which they provide instructions and gather information about the respondent. Documents 9 through 13 represent the Master Services Agreement, or MSA, and MSA attachments, and that's where you will find the primary contractual terms and conditions. Documents 14 and 15 are your statement of work or SOW documents, and those are your functional requirements. Documents 16 and 17 are your financial documents, and that's where you will find the financial requirements and pricing information. DIR anticipates an initial contract term of 4 years with 4 optional 1-year renewals. In the event of prolonged contract negotiations due to the number and/or significance of exceptions taken, lack of responsiveness, or other failure to close contract negotiations on the part of the respondent that are not due to a failure on the part of DIR, DIR may, in its sole discretion, bypass the respondent and commence negotiations with the next highest scoring respondent, or continue with the current respondent with a shorter contract term. You will find the schedule in the RFO under section 3.3, Schedule of Events. Deadline for submitting your questions is tomorrow at 5 p.m. The deadline for submitting your responses is March 24 at 2 o'clock. And we anticipate contract award in the month of May. Response organization is found in the RFO section 3.7.1. The response shall be organized as follows. Package 1 is the administrative submission requirements. Package 2, response to service requirements. Package 3 are your final financial provisions, and package 4 is your hub subcontracting plan. RFO section 3.7.2.1 details what your administrative requirements are. This table can be found in that document as well. On the left-hand side are the names of the documents, and this refers to sections in that document, in that section where they will have instructions. The form of response, that refers to how you will be naming your documents. The ABC refers to the 3-letter acronym you will choose for yourself as your entity when you submit these documents. You will notice that some of the documents have the phrase "if applicable," which means that not every single form may apply to your entity. Be sure to complete and sign RFO Attachment 1, which is the Respondent Information Executed Offer Form, because it contains mandatory information such as a DUNS number, which is needed for financial review. If you do not provide a DUNS number, and as a result, a financial review cannot be completed, then the response will be rejected. Next slide, please. RFO section 3.7.2.2 is your response to service requirements. Now, this is a long table, so I've separated just for the purposes of this presentation into 2 slides. These documents, in addition to pricing, are scored, so please complete them thoroughly with information related to the scope of this RFO. Next slide, please. You will notice at the bottom of this table, there are 2 documents where the phrase "if applicable" appears. All the other documents are mandatory. The red line version of the Master Services Agreement is only required if you're taking exceptions to the Master Services Agreement. The RFO Attachment 4 exceptions document, that's only required if you're taking exceptions to any requirement in the RFO in addition to your Master Services Agreement. So all your exceptions need to be listed in that document to be considered. And we will talk more about exceptions later on in the presentation. Next slide, please. RFO section 3.7.2.3 are your financial provisions, and RFO section 3.7.2.4 talks about package 4, which is your hub subcontracting plan. Things to remember. Signed addenda. So every addendum will have a first page, which is where you will sign, followed by the rest of the pages of the addendum. When you're submitting your response, you will not need to submit the entire addendum, which could consist of various pages. Like, for instance, the first addendum that we will issue will have a link to the presentation slides, and questions and answers. So we don't need all those pages. We do need that first page, which is where your signature will be. So every addendum that is issued will have a first page. You can group all these first pages for each addendum after you sign them into one document if you like, or separate documents, as long as we have that first page of each addendum. In terms of references, DIR is not responsible for non-responsive references. So please make sure the email addresses you provide are not undeliverable. When you submit your response, be sure to hit submit prior to the due date and time. 1 minute makes a difference when it comes to procurements. The timestamp will be the time that is received in our Outlook system. Now I will go over the evaluation criteria. In the RFO section 4.2, it lists the evaluation criteria, and it states best value will be determined in accordance with Texas Government Code section 2157.003. DIR will use the following criteria listed in order of priority to determine the best value for the state. Technical solution will be worth 45%, and we will be considering your response to SOW requirements, the respondent qualifications, technical solution summary, desired functionality, and desired solution functionality narrative. Service delivery is worth 15%, which includes system support, system currency, service level agreements, and proposed account organization. Experience and past performance is worth 15%. Pricing is worth 15% as well, and your transition plan will be worth 10%. You will notice that the names in the brackets refers to those documents in your section 2, package 2 response to requirements documents. And so it's broken out into how they'll be grouped in terms of scoring. DIR may clarify specific point or portions, but will not request missing documentation. It is respondent's responsibility to ensure all required documents are provided. I will now turn the time over to Teresa Williamson, the Hub Program Manager.
Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Williamson. I am the Hub Program Manager. Next slide. We are going to talk about the Hub Subcontracting Plan. There is a sample form that will be included for your use. Respondents must complete the form and print, sign, and submit a signed copy with their response. A signature is required with your HSP. Next slide. All respondents are required to submit an HSP. Failure to submit a completed HSP will cause your response to be rejected. This is a pass-fail item. There are 3 ways to complete your HSP. You will self-perform, meet or exceed the Hub goal and complete Method A, or not meet the Hub goal and complete Method B. Respondents must complete a new HSP plan and a good faith effort for this procurement. Next slide. The Hub goal for this RFO is 26%. If your proposed subcontracting meets or exceeds the 26% Hub goal, you'll complete Method A. Be sure to identify all Hub and non-Hub vendors that you will be subcontracting with. Include the anticipated dollar amounts and expected percentages. So you will need to complete sections 1, 2, 4, and Method A. Please, again, do not forget to sign and date your section 4 on your HSP. Next slide. If you're going to subcontract below the Hub goal, you will complete Method B. Be sure to solicit a minimum of 3 Hub certified companies and 2 minority trade organizations. You must allow them 7 working days to respond to you prior to the due date of this RFO. Include your outreach to these entities with your HSP. So you will need to complete sections 1, 2, 4, and Method B, Attachment B. Again, don't forget to include approximate dollar amounts and percentages. Next slide. If you will be self-performing, you will complete sections 1, 2, 3, and 4. In your self-performing justification, you will identify how your company will fulfill this contract with its own staff, equipment, and resources. Please do not include any statements of you will subcontract in the future or if you need to. Next slide. This is my contact information. The Hub office will provide a complimentary review of your HSP prior to the due date. You must contact us no later than 7 days prior to the due date of this RFO. We're glad to help, and we're here for all things Hub. Thanks.
Thanks, Teresa. We will now turn the time over to Elizabeth Cooper.
Hi, thank you, Jennifer. I'm Elizabeth Cooper. I'm the Director of Technology Policy Planning and Governance, and the statewide Electronic and Information Resources Accessibility Program falls in my area of responsibility. During this presentation, you will hear me refer to it as EIR Accessibility. I'll be covering RFO attachments 5, 6, and 7 that are please. Let's start with a little bit of background. The Texas Government Code requires that all state agencies and publicly funded institutions of higher education comply with EIR accessibility standards. The purpose is for the general public and state employees to have the same access to government information and services regardless of ability or disability. The requirements are defined in the Texas Administrative Code, and they conform to the Worldwide Web Consortium 2.0 AA technical standards. So accordingly, DIR requires all vendors to provide accessibility documentation in their responses to this procurement solicitation. Next slide, please. So depending on what you offer, you may be required to submit up to 3 types of documents. For this procurement, there may be a VPAT required. And this is required for all commercial off-the-shelf products, including software as a service or platforms that have any user interface. It's referred to as an accessibility conformance report once the VPAT, which is a template, is completed. There also may be a requirement for vendor accessibility development services information request. This is for anything that is not a commercial off-the-shelf offering, and it includes things like website development, application development, and other development services. All responses are required to include a policy-driven adoption for accessibility response questionnaire. That's RFO attachment number 7. And this is really just a self-assessment of your organization's accessibility maturity. Next slide, please. Let's take a next slide, please. So let's take a look at the VPAT. VPATs must be created using the VPAT template 2.3 or higher. If you do have an ACR created using an older VPAT version, but there haven't been any updates or new releases since 2019, that's acceptable. But be sure that there's no updates. This should be completed by individuals with relevant product knowledge. If it's the manufacturer, it should be completed by a manufacturer. If it is a reseller, they should obtain the VPAT from the manufacturer. It needs to be based on accessibility testing results and supported by documentation upon request. Next slide, please. The Vendor Accessibility Development Services Information Request is a form that needs to be completed if any of the following types of services are offered: website development services, web application development, custom development services, client-based software applications, or others. Next slide, please. And the policy-driven adoption for accessibility self-assessment is required to be completed by anyone responding to the submission. It's really an indicator of the extent to which the organization has implemented accessibility best practices within their operations. It asks questions like, do you have a policy or plan related to accessibility? Do you have governance in place? Are you integrating accessibility into key phases of the business process? The self-assessment creates a maturity score, and this can help your organization identify where you are in your accessibility journey. We're looking for complete, credible PDAAs. If you have a low maturity score, that doesn't necessarily affect your competitiveness in this solicitation. Next slide, please. And there are additional resources on our website, and the VPAT, VADCER template, and PDAA template were included as part of this solicitation. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Elizabeth. We will now turn the time over to Janie Weber.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you, Jennifer. My name is Janie, and I will be talking about the matters of law and exceptions. So let's all jump in for the ride. Thank you for moving the slide deck. So first, let's go with the exceptions. Respondents are encouraged not to request exceptions to standard contract terms and conditions. DIR does occasionally, in their sole discretion, accept, well, we actually may or may not accept the respondent's requested exceptions. Please also keep in mind the exceptions will be one factor considered by DIR in determining the best value for the state. If the exceptions are taken, the respondent must follow the format used in RFO Attachment 4 and provide it as a document labeled abc_exceptions.xlsx. In addition to the Excel file above, respondent needs to include in its response a red-lined version of the Master Services Agreement containing only those exceptions specific to those items. Further, respondent shall include a comment with each red line explaining why the red line language is necessary and why the respondent cannot comply with the original language. And as one of the lawyers, I can say we really appreciate the explanations that accompany exceptions. The respondent must provide as a separate Word file entitled abc_MSA_exceptions.docx. Next slide, please. Exceptions will be considered. The respondent may be removed from further consideration if DIR determines its exceptions are excessive in quantity or substance. In the event of a prolonged contract negotiation due to the number and/or significance of exceptions taken, lack of responsiveness, or other failure to close contract negotiations on the part of the respondent that are due to a failure, or other let me start from, I got a little lost here. Let me start. Strike that for the record. The respondent may be removed from further consideration if DIR determines its exceptions are excessive in quantity or substance in the event of prolonged contract negotiations due to the number and/or significance of exceptions taken, lack of responsiveness, or other failure to close contract negotiations on the part of respondent that are not due to a failure on the part of DIR. DIR may, in its sole discretion, bypass the respondent and commence negotiations with the next highest scoring respondent, or continue with the current respondent with a shorter contract term. If there are no exceptions, the respondent shall explicitly state the respondent takes no exception to any part of this RFO. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk about designated contacts. Respondents, potential respondents, and their representatives and employees shall not attempt to discuss the contents of this RFO with any employees or representatives of DIR other than designated contacts. Failure to observe this restriction may result in disqualification of any related response. Next slide, please. Legal entity name. Respondents must use their legal name, which what we mean by that is the name must match the name on file with the Texas Secretary of State. DUNS number provided must match the legal entity name and the address on record with D&B to ensure a proper match is made. Please note, failure to provide the correct legal name and DUNS number may lead to delays in contract awards. Next slide, please. And here we're going to talk our last section for legal about the Public Information Act. Please be advised, all information submitted, including all documents, emails, and attachments, is subject to the Public Information Act, which is found in the Texas Government Code, Chapter 552. We ask that you clearly mark any information that is confidential, proprietary, or copyrighted. Please also note information not clearly marked will be released upon request. Information clearly marked will be submitted to the Office of the Attorney General to determine whether the requested information should be released. And a final note, please coordinate with your legal counsel. And this concludes the legal portion of the presentation. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Janie. We will now take a short break for 5 minutes. Just a reminder, when you're asking questions, please reference the RFO section number and/or the document with your question. Questions that are answered today are unofficial until distributed as an addendum. And for additional questions that you haven't had a chance to ask today, by tomorrow, please submit them to my email address at dir.texas.gov. We will now start the 5 minutes.
Jennifer, I was going to offer a suggestion. It's 2:34. Why don't we do 6 minutes and just come back at an even 2:40? Would that work?
Perfect.
Awesome. See you back at 2:40, everybody. Okay, it is 2:40. Jennifer, shall we proceed with some questions?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, first question. What is a data asset specifically?
Bear with me as I come off mute. This is Stacy, and I can answer this one. So a data asset may be a tabular data set. It may be a visualization, such as a chart or a map, or it could be some other customized page. But if you'd like to see the current assets that we do have, you are definitely welcome to browse our catalog on our current Texas Open Data Portal, data.texas.gov.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What platform is the current data portal on, and specifically the challenges with it?
Hey, Tom, this is Ed. I'll answer that. So currently we are on the Tyler Technologies / Socrata platform. That's our current provider for our open data portal. We do not have any current challenges with the current platform at all.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Next question. From what you have described, you seem to be looking for a provider of technical services only. However, a few of your objectives, such as citizen engagement and increasing awareness of the availability of open data, go beyond mere technology. In Europe, these components were instrumental to the success of the open data programs there. Will you be welcoming proposals that extend the scope of work into services that create public engagement, dissemination, and e-learning to citizens?
Yes, I believe that an open data portal platform is more than just technology. It is certainly a means for government to be transparent and to provide information to its citizens. But also at the same time, we want to make sure the types of data that's published is relevant to the constituents or the data consumer. So I would think that any proposal or response associated with helping the Texas Department of Information Resources in further research or further outreach, the options associated with the open data portal, we would welcome to understand that from the responses.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Could you please clarify who the incumbent is?
The incumbent is Tyler Technologies / Socrata.
Okay, next question. Is it possible to know the basics of the current architecture of the existing portal? It is useful to formulate a transition plan. We would like to know if it is self-hosted or in the cloud, what is the software being used, or if you rely on a software as a solution, etc.
Yeah, for that question, Tom, I think what we'd like to do is be able to provide a written response to the details because it is quite technical.
Next question, what is the system currency specifically? Am I reading that correct, Jose? System currency. Okay, what is system currency specifically?
I'm not sure what that is related to specifically. We are on the most current version of our open data portal through our current vendor, if that was the intent of the question. So in other words, it's not a legacy application. We always remain current on the current offering by the vendor, by Tyler Technologies.
Okay, next question. Is it possible to extend the due date for questions beyond tomorrow?
I'll take that one. At this time, we didn't anticipate extending the due date for questions.
Okay, and next question, I believe this may have been addressed. The state already has an open data portal in place. Has the solution been found deficient and is considered a legacy solution and is no longer in consideration?
The current platform, as I answered previously, it has no issues at this time. It is not considered legacy.
Okay, next question. Document 15, tab 4, number 4.9. Are respondents required to have FedRAMP and or TexRAMP authorization at the time of submission? If not, at what point will respondents be required to provide proof of authorization in this process?
I am familiar with the TexRAMP program, but I am not familiar with the requirements of it and meeting the obligations associated with that. We'll have to research that and get back with a written response.
Next question, is the incumbent bidding?
I have no idea.
One of your slides says to speak about system currency in our response. Maybe that's a follow-up to the previous currency question.
I think obviously we want to understand the respondent's current platform offering. And I believe that section also relates to kind of long-term, how do you plan to keep it current? Or what's your roadmap associated with maintaining currency?
Okay, next question. Can you please clarify 4.20? A solution will have the ability to automatically create a form for future use based on usage patterns.
So our current platform provides that capability to create an intake form that is leveraged in several initiatives at DIR and at other agencies. The form provides a capability for consumers to add information, and then it's being leveraged in a project to match up supply and demand. So the example I'll provide is Senator Royce West has a public job matching or supply demand matching program each year. And we leverage the open data portal in that capacity of creating a form for both suppliers and requesters.
Okay, next question. Do you consider the portal mission critical? Do you have target service levels in mind or an SLA to match?
The portal is critical. Recent legislation has identified the Texas Open Data Portal as the designated internet site for the state of Texas. And as Stacy mentioned, Senate Bill 475 further reiterated the importance of it by requiring agencies to post a minimum of 3 high-value data sets. So we consider it a critical component of the Texas data management program and a fulfillment and compliance with statute, with law that has been passed in previous legislative sessions. And I think there was a second part to that question, Tom. I can't recall. If you could repeat it, please.
That question read, do you consider the portal mission critical? And then do you have target service levels in mind or an SLA to match?
We do require SLAs. They're listed in the requirements document around response time, around, of course, portal uptime and availability, and escalation response time.
Okay, next question. Why rebid this if you are happy with the current vendor and product? Is it just a timing issue that you were required to put it out to bid?
All DIR and state contracts are required to go through a competitive bid process. This is part of that process we are fulfilling today, and that's part of the state law that's required.
Next question. If there are no specific challenges with the current system, then what's the expectations from the new solution as it has not been catered by current system? I think that means it's not being catered by the current system.
Well, in any competitive bid process, you get to understand what other offerings are available and be able to see what other features and capabilities are available. It has been 4 years since we last bid out this contract, and over that time, technology has changed, as well as, again, features and capabilities of portal products. So this effort will allow us to identify various options and see how they compare to the requirements as identified in the RFO.
Okay, next question. Is there any preference for an open source based solution versus a proprietary solution that locks in DIR to that vendor?
At this time, we are looking for a proprietary solution rather than an open source solution, given the resources associated in supporting an open source type product.
Okay, next question. Do you need to automate some of the back-end processes too? For example, the processes by which you collect or harvest the data set from the respective sources. That would enable you to scale up better as the services become more successful with citizens.
Yes, automation is a critical component of this RFO. We, have a combination currently on the platform that allows for manual publishing process and automated publishing process. Large data sets and agencies that have extensive published assets leverage a automated process, so it makes their job easier to publish the assets on a monthly or weekly basis, depending on how the frequency of change happens. So it's an important component in the RFO, and important that we have options associated with automation in the publication process.
Okay, next question. What is your vision for supporting blockchain use cases?
Well, actually, in the last legislative session, and I don't have the bill number, but there was a blockchain work group that has been established for the state of Texas. We know that they are just getting formed, and we'll be doing a study associated with blockchain and how it could be incorporated into potentially Texas government. We, the Open Data Portal team, have helped the blockchain group get started. There is already a position within our Open Data Portal for that work group, and their efforts and their output will be a part of the study that will be a part of the consideration perhaps in the next legislative session that's coming out in 2023. How the Open Data Portal relates to blockchain will depend upon the outcome of the work group and obviously anything that comes from future legislation.
Okay. Next question. Are most of the data assets you offer static? For example, Excel files a user can download, or are you moving to real-time data and APIs?
So there is static data on the Open Data Portal, and it is very minimal. There are certain reports and other pieces of information that are out there. I don't have the percentage breakdown, but it is very minor. Real-time data needs or requests are already in play with one of our customers. I'll call it near real-time, where data is updated every 45 seconds. So we already have the APIs in the current platform, and we already have a customer that's leveraging it in a near real-time situation.
Okay, next question. Are there desired feature sets, functionality, and capabilities that the current solution does not provide that DIR will look to obtain through this RFO?
I think again, to an earlier question, is that we don't have visibility to what the marketplace offers today. And through this RFO process and understanding what other solutions are available, we will identify where and how those offerings will factor into our decision and ultimately potentially our future of where and how we grow the open data portal. I kind of, it's a question to me that I don't know what I don't know at this time, but through the response and review and evaluation, we'll get a better understanding of what is available and out there.
Okay, next question. Would you welcome additional services with relation to the evaluation of the success of the Open Data Portal initiative from a socioeconomic perspective? For example, how much actual reuse there is of the data you distribute, how satisfied citizens are, and the value created for the Texas economy?
Yes, I believe there are sections in the RFO that talk about options or additional enhancements that could be made available. Those sections will be reviewed as a part of the response. And again, we'd like to see and understand what other features and capabilities are available that we could enhance and augment the open data portal for the state of Texas.
Okay, next question. Can there be an RFI phase instead rather than an RFO, given the need to do a survey of the landscape?
At this time, our schedule does not allow for an RFI. We are proceeding with the RFO.
Okay, next question. In 2015-2016, what was the winning bid sum?
I'll have to get back to that question and answer, Tom.
Okay, those are all the questions I see in the Q&A panel at this point. Oh, one other question. The implementation timelines mentioned in around 3 months. What's your view for getting anyone to come and put it through?
I'm not sure I understand. I don't know how to answer that particular question. I mean, we expect the respondents to have the capability to be able to transition a platform to their platform within a 3-month period of time. As Stacy had indicated, there's 586 assets. We're working with 20 different customers. It would be a matter of establishing that project plan, that transition plan, and working directly with our team and with our customers to make that happen. That'd be, again, part of the expectation and the capability in the response back to us.
Okay, and then a follow-up. Yeah, as a new vendor, and is it good enough time for new implementation?
Yeah, I believe, Tom, that Ed has answered the questions and the related questions to that.
Okay, those are all the questions that I see, Jennifer.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So as quick reminders, the questions that were answered today, they're unofficial until distributed in the form of an addendum. Any changes or additional information regarding this RFO will be posted as an addendum to solicitation number DIR-CPO-TMP-562 on the ESBD. And it is the responsibility of respondents to monitor the ESBD website for addenda. So a good tip is just right before you submit, check the ESBD posting one more time to make sure there's an addendum that you've missed. The due dates, next slide, please. So tomorrow's the deadline for submitting questions at 5 o'clock. The deadline for submitting responses is March 24 at 2 o'clock, and we anticipate contract award in May. Once again, if you do have questions after the Q&A period has closed, questions dealing with submission, administrative type questions, you please direct them to my email at jennifer.tram@dir.texas.gov. Thank you for attending today, and we thank you for your time. We appreciate your time spent here.